The telegram from Boston caught up with me in Helena. Its message brief but unmistakable. She is not who she claims. I crumpled the paper in my fist, staring at the woman who'd arrived on yesterday's stage, the mail-order bride whose tears had moved me to unexpected compassion just 24 hours earlier. Sarah Foster sat across the room, unaware, carefully mending a tear in her traveling dress. Those same delicate hands that had trembled in mine, now steady with purpose. Outside our hotel window, Montana's unforgiving winter wind howled like a warning. What secret was she hiding beneath her schoolteacher persona and those haunted blue eyes? What had driven her to flee 3,000 miles to marry a stranger? The evidence in her valise, documents she guarded even in sleep, would soon make powerful men want us both dead. But in that moment, watching her methodical stitches close a ragged tear, I couldn't know that within a week. My ranch would be ashes, blood would stain mountain snow, and the woman I was beginning to trust would confess to taking a child that wasn't hers. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from every corner of the world. Autumn painted the Bitterroot Valley in shades of gold and crimson as I stood on the creaking platform of Willow Creek Station, Montana Territory. The year was 1878, and I'd been checking my pocket watch every few minutes for the past hour. My name is Hope Montgomery, and at 35, I was about to meet the woman who'd agreed to be my wife through an exchange of letters and practical promises. Nervous? Hope? Sheriff Tom Miller approached, his badge catching the September sunlight. Just eager to get it over with, I replied. Adjusting my freshly trimmed beard, Tom knew better. He'd served with me at Shiloh, understood the ghosts I'd carried west after the war, witnessed my grief when consumption took Catherine 3 winters ago. The distant rumble of wheels drew our attention as the stagecoach appeared around the bend. Dust billowed behind it, golden in the fading light. My loyal cattle dog, Rusty, perked his ears at the approaching sound. "Tough journey from Helena," the driver muttered as he jumped down. Then, lowering his voice, "Your mail-order bride's aboard. Been crying most of the way. Also had some fancy-dressed fellow asking after her back in Helena. Strange business." My stomach tightened. The correspondence with Miss Sarah Foster had been brief but promising. A 24-year-old schoolteacher from Boston seeking a fresh start. Nothing had suggested complications or pursuit. The coach door swung open. A small gloved hand appeared, followed by the hem of a dusty blue traveling dress. When she finally looked up, my rehearsed greeting died in my throat. Her face was streaked with tears, blue eyes red-rimmed and swollen. She clutched a small valise to her chest like armor. "Miss Foster." I removed my hat, stepping forward. She flinched slightly before composing herself. "I'm Hope Montgomery." I offered my hand, which she took with obvious reluctance. "Welcome to Willow Creek." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I apologize, Mr. Montgomery," she whispered, her voice breaking. "This is not how I intended our first meeting to be." Widow Jenkins and the blacksmith's wife had paused their conversation to watch us, their curiosity poorly disguised. By sundown, everyone would know Sarah Foster had arrived in tears. I guided her gently away from prying eyes toward a bench at the end of the platform. Once seated, I reached into my pocket and offered her my clean handkerchief. "You don't have to pretend with me," I said quietly. "Whatever's troubling you, Miss Foster, I reckon you've had a long journey to think on it. No need to force a smile on my account." Her eyes widened slightly as she accepted my handkerchief. "You're very kind, sir. I fear I may have made a terrible mistake." "Is it me?" I asked directly, though her gaze had already answered. "No," she interrupted, looking genuinely surprised. "No, Mr. Montgomery. It's not you." She glanced around nervously. "May we speak somewhere more private?" In my wagon, headed toward the ranch, I noticed her studying the terrain like someone mapping escape routes, an unusual skill for a Boston schoolteacher. When we crested the hill overlooking my property, her eyes widened at the vista, my two-story house with its wide porch, corrals, outbuildings, and cattle grazing in distant pastures. That night, after showing her to the room I'd prepared with fresh linens and wildflowers, I checked the property one final time. Near the barn, I found a cigarette butt, expensive tobacco, not mine or my ranch hands. Someone had been watching my house. From upstairs came the muffled sound of Sarah Foster crying into her pillow, secrets still untold between us. Dawn broke cold and clear over the Bitterroot Valley. I'd been up since before first light, moving through chores with practiced efficiency. Returning to the house, I found Sarah already awake, dressed in a practical gray dress, her honey blonde hair neatly pinned. "Good morning," she said, pouring coffee into a mug. "I hope you don't mind that I started breakfast over eggs and bacon. I explained the day ahead. I need to check the north pasture fence line. Would you like to come along? Might help you get your bearings." Relief flickered across her face. "I'd appreciate that." When she emerged from the house wearing a split riding skirt, I raised an eyebrow. "Not what I expected from a Boston schoolteacher," I commented, helping her mount a gentle mare named Penny. "My grandfather owned a farm outside Boston," she explained, settling comfortably in the saddle. "I spent summers there as a child. I may not be a cowgirl, but I can stay on a horse." As we rode, I pointed out landmarks, the creek that provided our water, the mountain passes that closed with winter snow, the boundaries of my property. Sarah listened attentively, asking intelligent questions about cattle operations and winter preparations. "It must get lonely out here," she observed as we paused on a ridge overlooking the valley. "It can," I admitted. "That's why I wrote that advertisement, I suppose." We reached the north fence line, and I dismounted to check damaged wire. Sarah joined me, holding tools as I worked, comfortable with manual labor in a way that contradicted her refined background. "Hope!" Sarah's voice cut through the air, suddenly urgent. She pointed to the ground near where we were working. "Look, fresh boot prints, not mine, not my ranch hands, circled the fence post. Someone had been here, recently." "Get back on your horse," I said quietly. "Now." Back at the ranch, Sarah sank into a chair, shoulders slumping with what looked like resignation. "I didn't just lose my position because of a false accusation," she began. "There's more." For the next hour, she unraveled a tale more complex than I'd imagined. James Wellington wasn't merely a spurned suitor, but the son of a powerful Boston businessman with political connections. His father, Ezra Wellington, had built his fortune through questionable land deals and railroad speculation. "Because of these," she said, untying a portfolio and removing several documents, letters, ledgers, contracts, evidence of the Wellingtons' land fraud scheme. "They've been manipulating railroad routes, using inside information to buy property before routes are announced." "How did you get these?" I examined the papers, detailed records in elegant handwriting, letters on official stationery. "I was engaged briefly to James's business partner, Michael Blackwood." She pushed up her sleeve, revealing a faded bruise circling her wrist. "That was the first time, not the last. I process this information slowly. These men will keep coming after you. Yes, she met my gaze directly. That's why I understand if you want me to leave. I've brought danger to your door. I considered my options. The sensible choice would be to send her away. But looking at Sarah, the courage it took to flee across the country alone, I saw something familiar, the same fierce will to survive that got me through Shiloh. I don't scare easily, Miss Foster, I said quietly, and I don't abandon people who need help. That evening, I discovered another cigarette butt near the barn. Someone was watching us. The wedding with Preacher Jenkins was scheduled for Sunday, just 3 days away. Tom Miller needed to know about our unexpected complications, and we needed supplies from town. Tomorrow would bring new dangers. But for tonight, at least, Sarah Foster's secrets were no longer hers alone to carry. Morning brought a hard frost, the first serious one of the season. Sarah joined me in the yard, wrapped in a shawl against the chill. "I'd like to go into town with you today," she said without preamble. "You sure that's wise?" I asked, wiping my hands on a rag. "If someone's looking for you—" "Hiding won't solve anything," she interrupted. "Besides, if I'm to live here, I should meet the townspeople properly." The ride to Willow Creek was tense, both of us scanning our surroundings constantly. The town wasn't much. A dusty main street with false-fronted buildings, general store, post office, saloon, and a small white church at the edge of town. Inside Wilson's general store, Beatrice Wilson descended immediately, her plump face alight with curiosity, barely disguised as welcome. "You must be Miss Foster. We're so pleased you've arrived safely." She took Sarah's hands in hers. "My, Hope has landed himself a pretty one," while Sarah handled Beatrice's interrogation with surprising grace. I made my way to Oliver Wilson at the counter. "Need the usual supplies," I told him, sliding over my list. "And news. Anything unusual happen in town lately? Strangers passing through?" Oliver pushed his spectacles higher on his nose. "Had a gentleman in here yesterday afternoon, asking after new arrivals. Well-dressed fellow, Eastern accent. Said he was looking for his sister." My hand tightened on the counter edge. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing specific. Didn't like his manner. Too smooth by half." At the sheriff's office, Tom listened gravely as Sarah explained her situation, the Wellingtons, the evidence she carried, the man who'd followed her to Bitterroot. "Wellington's been asking pointed questions about you too. Hope," Tom said, his expression troubled. "About Shiloh." The name hung in the air between us. Sarah's questioning gaze met mine. That evening, with the fire crackling in the hearth, I finally told her what Wellington had been investigating, how I'd shot a surrendering Confederate lieutenant at Shiloh, following orders that no officers were to survive that ridge. I followed orders, shot a man who'd surrendered, who was protected by the rules of war. The admission felt both terrible and freeing. Some nights, I still see his face. Sarah reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. "War makes monsters of good men. Hope, you've been carrying this alone too long. We've both done things we regret," she added softly, "but perhaps that's why we found each other." A sharp crack interrupted us, a rifle shot from outside, followed by Rusty's frantic barking. I grabbed my rifle and moved to the window. Through the glass, I saw Henry Jenkins running toward the house from the pasture. Behind him, smoke rose from the direction of the north fence line. "They shot at me," Henry exclaimed when I met him outside, "and set fire to the haystack up there. For the next 3 hours, We fought the blaze, managing to save about half the hay before exhaustion forced us to stop. The loss was significant. We could survive the winter with careful rationing. But Wellington was showing he could hurt us, disrupt our livelihood. We should postpone the wedding. Sarah suggested that night. That's exactly what he wants, I countered. To isolate us, force us into defensive positions. We go forward as planned. As I made one final check of the property before bed, I found Sarah on the porch, wrapped in a quilt against the cold, staring at the distant mountains, now obscured by darkness. "When did you decide," she asked quietly, "that I matter more than your ranch? Your land?" "When I saw you standing in the doorway of the study, refusing to leave without answers," I replied honestly. "Your courage, your conviction, that's when I knew." At the top of the stairs, we paused outside her bedroom door. "3 more days until the wedding," she said softly, "if you still want to go through with it." "I do." The words came without hesitation, surprising us both with their certainty. "Even knowing what it might cost you?" "Some things are worth the price, Sarah." She rose on tiptoe and pressed a gentle kiss to my cheek. "Good night, Hope," she whispered, then slipped into her room, the door closing softly behind her. Friday dawned with snow falling in thick, silent flakes that quickly blanketed the ranch. A commotion outside drew us to the window, riders approaching through the whiteness. I recognized Tom Miller's broad-shouldered silhouette, but the others remained obscured until they drew closer. A Native American man on a paint horse, and beside him, a woman. "Joseph Two Stars and his daughter, Elizabeth," I explained to Sarah as we went to meet them. Joseph Two Stars was a Salish elder whose people had lived in the Bitterroot Valley for generations. Elizabeth, educated at a mission school, served as interpreter and intermediary with the town. "Bad men ask about your land, your water." Elizabeth translated her father's warning. "Offer money to Blackwood men for information about Salish trails through your property." "White men approaching from the south," another warrior reported through Elizabeth. "Many riders, armed, less than an hour away." The chief issued orders that sent people hurrying through the camp. "You must leave now. Take North Trail. 2 warriors will guide you." "Elizabeth stays here," he informed us. "Her people need her now." As we mounted our fresh horses, the chief approached one final time, handing Sarah a small leather pouch. "Medicine bundle," he explained. "For protection on journey." Then he turned to me, his expression solemn. "Man who pursues you, his heart is twisted with hate. Such men destroy themselves eventually, but often take others with them. Be watchful." The path immediately turned treacherous, a narrow track winding up through pine forests toward the first of the high passes. By midday, we'd climbed high enough to look back over the valley. In the distance, smoke rose from the Salish camp, but whether from cooking fires or something more sinister, I couldn't tell. "Do you think Wellington would attack the camp?" Sarah asked, following my gaze. "I don't know," I admitted. "He's shown himself willing to burn my ranch, to attempt murder." After crossing the first treacherous pass in near silence, we made camp in a protected hollow beside a partially frozen stream. As we ate the rabbit one warrior had caught, I noticed Sarah's exhaustion, the dark circles beneath her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands. 2 more days, I reminded her softly. Then this part at least will be over. "Do you ever wonder if it's worth it?" she asked. "If justice is worth this much sacrifice?" "I think of Catherine," I answered honestly, "of how she believed in doing what's right, no matter the cost. And I think of the Salish, fighting to keep lands that are rightfully theirs." I touched the portfolio that never left Sarah's possession. Yes, it's worth it. Dawn brought gray skies and the threat of more snow. By mid-morning, we heard distant gunshots behind us, Wellington's men, following our trail despite the dangerous conditions. As we approached the second pass, our guide suddenly raised his hand, signaling for silence. Voices carried on the wind, coming not from behind, but ahead. Our guide returned from scouting with grim news. More riders waited on the far side, positioned to intercept us. Wellington split his forces, I realized. Some followed directly, while others circled around to cut us off. We were caught between two dangers, with only a treacherous side trail as escape, a narrow ledge barely wide enough for a horse, with a sheer drop of hundreds of feet on one side and towering rock face on the other. "We'll take it," Sarah decided, straightening in her saddle despite her exhaustion, better than surrendering after coming so far. Every step along the narrow ledge required complete concentration. The slightest misstep, potentially fatal. Wind tugged at our clothing, threatening to unbalance us at critical moments. After what seemed an eternity, the ledge widened, then rejoined a more established trail descending toward a forested valley. We'd bypassed Wellington's ambush, but lost precious time. We pushed our exhausted horses toward Helena, now visible as distant lights in the valley below. Our Blackfoot guides led us to a small trapper's cabin hidden in a grove of aspens, a way station they sometimes used when traveling to and from the territorial capital. "We should separate the documents," Sarah suggested as we ate our meager supplies. "Carry them in different places, so if one of us is caught, the other might still get through." "We stay together," I insisted, but Sarah's logic was inescapable. "Hope, think clearly. Wellington has men watching both sides of the pass. Our chances are better if we split up." Reluctantly, I agreed. "First light, then. You take the main road with one guide. I'll approach from the east with the other. We meet at the Federal Building at midday." At dawn, I helped Sarah mount, adjusting her stirrups one last time. She looked down at me, her blue eyes filled with emotions too complex for words. "Midday at the Federal Building," she reaffirmed. "Don't be late. Hope Montgomery." "Wouldn't dream of it, Mrs. Montgomery," I replied, forcing lightness into my tone. My route proved circuitous, following game trails through dense forest. By mid-morning, Helena was visible, but still distant. As we emerged from a particularly dense stretch of pine forest into a small clearing, a rifle shot shattered the stillness. My guide cried out, toppling from his horse as a bullet struck his shoulder. "Show yourself." "Wellington," I called, dragging the wounded man behind a fallen log. "Just want to talk." "Montgomery," came that cultured Eastern accent. "About Miss Foster and the items she stole from my family." "She's Mrs. Montgomery now," I replied, checking my rifle and assessing our position. Wellington laughed, the sound chilling in its lack of genuine humor. "A marriage of convenience, I'm sure." "Tell me, did she share the whole truth with you? About Michael Blackwood's unfortunate accident? About the child?" The questions caught me off guard. What child? Sarah had mentioned no child. "Whatever story you're selling, I'm not buying," I responded. Scanning the tree line, I counted at least 3 positions where branches occasionally swayed without wind. "No story, just facts." Wellington replied, "Sarah Foster was more than Michael's secretary. Ask her about Emma sometime, if you live to see her again." Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. My wounded guide, despite his injury, managed to reload for me, his stoic determination matching my own. During a brief lull, he spoke, his English broken but understandable. "They try circle behind, must move soon." He pointed to a dense thicket about 30 yards to our right, then created a distraction, firing rapidly while shouting a warrior's challenge. Taking advantage, I half-carried him toward the thicket as bullets chipped bark around us. We followed a ravine containing a small stream flowing toward Helena, sometimes wading in the icy water to hide our tracks. By noon, when I was supposed to meet Sarah, we'd reached the outskirts of Helena. My guide fading from blood loss. At a small church, Reverend Thomas Parker provided sanctuary and tended my guide's wound. "Marshal Donovan is a member of my congregation," he said. "A good man." He led me through back alleys to approach the federal building's service entrance. As we neared our destination, 2 men in expensive Eastern clothing stood watching the door. "Wellington's men," I whispered. We circled around to enter through the territorial offices next door. Inside the federal building, raised voices reached us. One female, familiar and beloved, Sarah. She stood in the center of the main hall, her portfolio clutched to her chest, surrounded by 3 men, 2 I didn't recognize, and Wellington himself, impeccably dressed. "As I've explained repeatedly," Sarah was saying, "I need to see Marshal Donovan immediately." "And as I've told you, Mrs. Montgomery," Wellington replied smoothly, "the Marshal is unavailable." Sarah's gaze lifted over Wellington's shoulder, finding me on the stairs. Relief flooded her expression momentarily before she carefully masked it. Wellington turned, his cold eyes finding mine with an expression of satisfied triumph. "Ah, Montgomery, right on time." As I moved toward Sarah, Wellington continued with false concern. "Marshal Donovan has been called away to investigate a reported Indian uprising near the Blackfoot winter camp." Terrible business. The implication was clear. Wellington had manufactured a crisis to draw Donovan away, perhaps even orchestrating violence against the people who helped us. Reverend Parker suggested bringing the documents to Judge Wilson instead. Wellington's mask of civility slipped momentarily, irritation flashing in his eyes. As Parker escorted Sarah toward the judge's chambers, Wellington signaled to his men, who immediately drew concealed weapons. One grabbed for the portfolio, while another leveled his pistol at the arriving Marshal Donovan, who had returned despite Wellington's diversion. I tackled the man attempting to seize the documents. Through the chaos, I saw Wellington himself draw a small derringer, aiming not at Donovan or his men, but directly at Sarah. "Give me the documents, Mrs. Montgomery," he demanded, "or I promise you'll join Emma in whatever hell receives child killers." The accusation froze Sarah momentarily. As Wellington advanced, she stepped forward, holding the portfolio out as if in surrender. "You want these so badly, James," she challenged. "Here they are." As Wellington reached for the documents, Sarah's other hand emerged with her small derringer. She fired at point-blank range, hitting him in the shoulder. I reached them as Wellington raised his weapon again, despite his injury. "You should have stayed a schoolteacher, Sarah," he snarled. "You never had the stomach for this world." "Perhaps not," she acknowledged. "But I had something you never will. James, a conscience." Wellington laughed, the sound edged with madness. "And what good has it done you? Your precious evidence will burn. You'll hang for Emma's death, and your frontier hero will die knowing you lied to him from the beginning." "You're wrong about all of it," I interrupted. "Starting with Emma." With sudden, desperate speed, Wellington swung his derringer toward me rather than Sarah. squeezing the trigger before Donovan could react. Pain exploded in my chest. I staggered backward, dimly aware of Sarah's scream and the sound of multiple gunshots as Donovan and his deputies fired at Wellington. I fell, the marble floor cold against my back as warmth spread across my shirt. Sarah's face appeared above me, her blue eyes wide with terror. Hope. Her voice seemed to come from a great distance. "The documents," I managed, tasting copper in my mouth. "Yes, they're safe. Marshal Donovan has them." Tears streamed down her face. "But they don't matter. None of it matters if you—" "It all matters," I interrupted. "Justice matters. Truth matters." The pain receded somewhat, replaced by a spreading coldness that seemed to begin in my extremities and work inward. As darkness claimed me, Sarah's final words followed me into unconsciousness. "Don't you dare leave me. Hope Montgomery, we have a home to rebuild. Remember?" Consciousness returned gradually, in fragments that didn't immediately connect. Pain, dull but persistent in my chest. The smell of carbolic acid and clean linen. Warmth around my hand, another hand holding mine. I opened my eyes to filtered sunlight and Sarah's face. Her head bent over what appeared to be a journal as she wrote, her free hand still clasping mine. "That better not be my eulogy," I managed, my voice a rasping whisper. Sarah's head jerked up, the journal falling forgotten as she leaned forward, joy and disbelief washing across her features. "Hope appears so," I agreed, attempting a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Though I'm not entirely convinced that's a good thing yet. The doctor said the bullet missed your heart by less than an inch," Sarah explained, tears welling in her eyes. "You've been unconscious for 3 days." As my vision cleared, I recognized we were in a small but well-appointed room, Dr. Hollister's home, Sarah explained. When I asked about Wellington, she confirmed he was dead, killed by Marshal Donovan's deputies when he shot me. "It's over, then." Sarah's smile was tinged with sadness. "This part, yes. Marshal Donovan has the documents. Arrests have already begun. Territorial officials involved in the scheme. Blackwood himself. Even the Indian agent who was preparing removal orders." Relief washed through me, though questions still lingered. "Your guide? The one who was shot?" "Recovering well, though slower than you," Sarah said with a small smile. "Reverend Parker has been caring for him at the church." Each answer brought more questions, my mind struggling to piece together the 3 days I'd lost to unconsciousness. But fatigue was already pulling at me, the brief conversation draining what little strength I'd regained. The next time I woke, Marshal Donovan sat beside the bed, reviewing papers by lamplight. "The documents?" I asked, immediately concerned by Sarah's absence, safe and damning. Donovan's weathered face hardened with professional satisfaction. "Got enough evidence to put Blackwood away for years, along with several officials." He reached into his coat, withdrawing an official envelope. "Judge Wilson asked me to deliver this once you were conscious. It's a formal statement clearing your name regarding the Shiloh incident." I stared at the envelope, momentarily speechless. "How?" "Wellington's investigation stirred up old records," Donovan explained, "including the report from your commanding officer that never made the official account. Turns out that Confederate lieutenant wasn't surrendering at all. The white flag was a ruse while his men repositioned." The revelation hit me with physical force. All these years, I'd carried the guilt of shooting a surrendering man, never knowing the complete story. When Sarah returned, I told her what Donovan had revealed. She sat beside me on the edge of the bed, taking my hand in hers, "Oh, hope," she breathed, understanding immediately the significance. "All these years, you've blamed yourself without cause." "Not entirely without cause," I corrected gently. "I still took a life, but knowing it wasn't what I thought, that changes things." "Sarah," I said softly, "there's something else we need to discuss." Wellington mentioned Emma, a child. Sarah's gaze dropped to our joined hands. "There's more you need to know about why I took the documents, about what happened afterward, about the blue ribbon." She took a deep breath, steadying herself for what was clearly a painful recounting. "When I worked as Michael Blackwood's secretary, I noticed Emma immediately. Such a quiet, watchful child, terrified of making mistakes. The portrait she painted turned my stomach. A father's calculated cruelty toward his own daughter, psychological and physical abuse disguised as discipline, all while maintaining a public facade of the grieving widower. I couldn't leave her there," Sarah said simply. "When I fled with the documents, I took Emma too. What happened in Chicago? I left her with my friend while I went for supplies." Sarah whispered, withdrawing a small blue ribbon from her pocket. "When I returned, Emma was gone. I searched frantically. When I found her room, James was standing by an open window. Tears filled her eyes. I was too late. He killed her to punish me, to silence a witness to Michael's abuse." Understanding dawned fully, the burden Sarah had carried alone, the reason for her tears that first day, the secret too painful to share until forced by circumstance. "You tried to save her," I said gently. "Wellington is responsible for her death, not you." Sarah's answering smile was tremulous but genuine. "I'd like to believe that someday." 6 weeks after Wellington's bullet nearly ended my life, we prepared to leave Helena. The journey back to Bitterroot took nearly a week, traveling by stagecoach to accommodate my still healing body. As we crested the final hill overlooking the valley, the familiar view spread before us: the winding creek, the open pastures, the distant mountains. Spring had arrived during our absence, painting the valley in green and gold, with wildflowers dotting the hillsides. The destruction became visible as we approached what remained of my home, blackened timbers standing like skeletal fingers against the sky. The stone chimney, a lone sentinel. The barn had survived, though with visible damage. The outbuildings stood mostly intact, a small mercy amid devastation. A bark interrupted our contemplation, familiar, joyous, disbelieving. From the direction of the barn came a streak of red-brown fur, moving so fast it was almost a blur, rusty, somehow alive and well, racing toward us with delirious excitement. "Thought you might show up today," called a voice from behind the barn. Tom Miller emerged, grinning broadly at our shock. "Stageline telegraphed from Helena that you were on your way." "How did he survive the fire?" I asked, running my hands over the dog's familiar coat. "Jenkins' boys found him the day after," Tom explained. "Martha's been caring for him since." Only now did I notice the neatly stacked piles of lumber and building materials arranged near the ruins. "You've been working on my place?" Tom shrugged, as if his efforts were unremarkable. "Community pitched in. Once word spread about what really happened, Wellington's schemes, the attack on the Blackfoot camp, folks wanted to help." He led us toward the bunkhouse, which had been expanded with a newly constructed lean-to. Inside, we found a simple but comfortable temporary dwelling, a bed, table and chairs, cooking stove, even shelves with basic supplies. "Martha organized this part," Tom explained. "Said you'd need somewhere to live while rebuilding." Spring unfolded into summer across the Bitterroot Valley, each day bringing visible progress as our new home took shape. Sarah proved herself as capable with hammer and saw as she was with teaching primer, working alongside me whenever her duties as the town's school teacher allowed. Joseph Two Stars and his people became regular visitors, trading herbal remedies for beef and grain. Elizabeth often joined Sarah at the school, helping bridge cultural differences among the children. On the anniversary of Sarah's arrival, I surprised her with a special dinner. Over the meal, she revealed news that left me momentarily speechless. She was expecting our child. After Emma, I wasn't sure I could bear to care for another child, she admitted. But this feels right, like healing, somehow. On a warm June morning, with sunlight streaming through the bedroom windows and meadowlarks singing in the nearby pasture, our daughter was born, Emma Catherine Montgomery, named for the child Sarah couldn't save and the wife I'd lost. That evening, watching Sarah and our daughter sleep, I took out the journal she'd given me months before and wrote, "Emma Catherine Montgomery arrived today at sunset, perfect in every detail. Looking at her, I see Sarah's strength and courage already evident in the way she grips my finger, in the clear gaze that seems to take in everything around her. I find myself thinking of that first day at the station, when a tearful bride stepped from the stagecoach and I offered the only comfort I knew how, permission to be authentic in her distress. You don't have to pretend with me," I told her, not realizing those words would become the foundation of our life together, today, holding our daughter while Sarah sleeps. I make the same promise to Emma. No pretense, no masks, only truth between us, however difficult or inconvenient. The mail-order bride who arrived in tears has become the heart of this place, of this family we're creating together. And those tears, honest, unashamed, human, were not weakness as I might once have thought, but the beginning of strength in the vast, unforgiving landscapes of the American frontier. Truth became the most valuable currency, when pretense is stripped away by necessity or courage. What remains is the foundation upon which genuine connections are built. The journey from strangers to family isn't measured in miles traveled or obstacles overcome, but in moments of raw honesty shared against all odds. The wounds we carry, whether from war, loss, or betrayal, need not define us if we find the strength to reveal them to another soul brave enough to witness our pain without judgment. In that exchange lies the beginning of healing. Perhaps this is what we all seek beneath our carefully constructed facades, not perfection or even forgiveness, but the freedom to be fully seen and accepted. To find someone who offers us the space to lay down our masks and say, "This is who I am, with all my scars and regrets." In such recognition, we discover that love isn't the absence of hardship, but the courage to face it together, to rebuild from ashes, to plant hope in soil made richer by past sorrows. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment sharing what resonated most with you. Subscribe for more tales of courage and transformation. And remember, your own story matters too.